Bleeding purple and gold. From the heart of Los Angeles, this is the LakersNation.com podcast with your host, Trevor Lane.
Welcome to today's show, everybody. The losing streak is over. The Los Angeles Lakers picked up a big win over the Atlanta Hawks, so we're definitely going to be talking about that. As always, guys, we are powered by CLNS Media and LakersNation.com, your one-stop shop for all things Lakers. Make sure you go check out LakersNation.com for all the latest breaking Lakers news. Well, we've got plenty to talk about, and so I've brought in Lakers Nation senior writer Harrison Fagan to help me break everything down that's going on in the world of the Los Angeles Lakers right now. Harrison, thanks so much for hopping on here.
No, it's always fun to come on, and I'm glad that you're going to be coming on Locked On Lakers on the other side of this kind of two-part crossover episode that I feel like we're doing. Like, I like doing these about once a month.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea. We're going to do this about once a month, and thanks for mentioning that there. I blew it. We are starting this show here on the Lakers Nation podcast, and about halfway through our intended topics, we're going to jump over to Locked On Lakers. So it's going to be split between the two. Kind of a nice, meeting of the minds. It's a good way to get together about once a month to talk through these things. I enjoy it.
Yeah, we're brokering peace in the podcast industry is how I like to see it.
I think that's a good way to look at it.
I just like to talk myself up and make myself sound more important than I am. That's basically the thing.
Well, I mean, that's in the job description, so I think we're okay there.
I think that is our job as podcast hosts.
Right. It's all about self-glorification and all that.
Yeah, exactly.
So Lakers, man, the Lakers got this big win over the Hawks. 9-game losing streak is snapped. How badly did they need this win, Harrison?
I mean, they historically, they kind of needed it. On a historic level, this would have been, if they had lost against the Atlanta Hawks tonight, this would have been tied their longest losing streak in franchise history. So the worst team in the league could not have come to town at a better time for the Lakers. But I think, the Hawks are obviously bad. And a lot of the times tonight, it looked kind of like a varsity team going against a JV squad because the Hawks are just very intentionally tanking. It's pretty transparent. But I don't want to take credit away from the Lakers. I thought they still did some really good things tonight. I thought their defensive activity, regardless of who they were playing, their defensive activity was a lot better. And sure, the results are going to be better against a less good team, but it just looked like they were doing the right things and it was just paying off and they were being rewarded for it and they got out in transition. And just overall, this was a really, really good win for the team tonight. I mean, there are no bad wins when you're on a 9-game losing streak, but there are things that they can carry forward from this, I would say.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've been talking about for so long that their defense has been slipping, and I feel like we saw them start to do the things in this game that they were doing previously in the season that made them top 10 in the league, top 5 even at one point. I won't go ahead and say, they're back and they're going to suddenly be a top 10 defensive team once again, but I'm saying we're starting to see helping the helper. We're starting to see guys going out and contesting shots. We saw that effort, all the things that were trademarks of this team early on. We kind of saw that come back. And again, like you said, this was the Atlanta Hawks. This is the worst team in the league record-wise. So we do have to put that asterisk on it, but still, impressive performance by the Lakers, a much-needed one, and at this point, you got to take it. I mean, you can't complain about a Lakers victory when they had a 9-game losing streak, and especially important, I thought, was the fast break points. I believe this is a season high for them. They had 42 fast break points, and I believe they had 28 at halftime.
It is not only a season. They were up 28-0 in fast break points at halftime. And it's not only a season high in fast break points. It is, according to Chris McGee of Spectrum Sportsnet, their most fast break points since 2001. So Magic Johnson was right. Showtime is back. And what's almost in all seriousness, what's amazing about this is that the team executed some of their fast breaks about as poorly as I've ever seen an NBA team run a fast break tonight. There were botched lob passes. There was just some terrible stuff, but they still it's amazing to think how many they could have had if they had just run competent fast breaks every time.
Oh yeah, I mean they started the game with one, right? I mean they got a steal, which was great. They made a defensive stop, got out in transition. KCP, instead of just taking the layup that was right there, threw this awkward pass to Lonzo, and Lonzo wasn't expecting it at all, so he traveled with it, and it was a turnover. And so yeah, I mean it's not like they are just poetry in motion or anything like that when you're watching them out there on the fast break, but they made a real effort to get stops on defense and then run like hell. And those are two things that Magic Johnson said the team was going to do last summer. And those are two things they got away from during this 9-game losing streak, two things that they were not very good at. And so now we're at least seeing it happen. We saw flashes. Lonzo had a few hit-ahead passes that were incredible. There was one where I believe he hit Josh Hart, I want to say, just in stride or the lob.
Yeah, it was Josh Hart right at the end of the game.
That was just, I mean, it was a touchdown pass. You know, if he's an inch off on that thing goes sailing out of bounds. It was perfectly placed. I mean, that was the kind of thing that fans were just drooling over when the Lakers drafted Lonzo, and we've seen it a little bit here and there, but it was really, really good to see those kind of passes being thrown in this win, because that's the kind of stuff that's going to get people excited again about the Lakers and some positivity. You know, it is so much of a roller coaster, and I felt like the kind of the mood around this team was just so down. I mean, you were there, you attended a bunch of the games. What was the mood like in the locker room lately? Was it as low as it is online with the fan base?
Well, so it's interesting because it depends on the time, right? It's like anything else. Like this is these guys' jobs. Like I don't think that there's any major, I don't think there's any major fractures in the locker room or anything where like these guys are turning on each other or anything like that. Like that team meeting was kind of blown up as like a big thing. I don't think in all realness that it was that big of a thing. And when you go into the locker room before games, these guys are all joking with each other. They seem to have good relationships. This is not a team that is just splintering apart at the seams, even though they're losing. But after the games, yes, they're despondent. And like these guys care. Like they may not always execute, and they've taken a fair amount of criticism for not always bringing it. And I think they've been self-critical for not always bringing it, but they definitely care about losing. Like the locker room, you know how when you're just like around somebody who's sad, feel it just based on their like react. Like that's how it feels to be in the locker room after the game. Is they're like some of these guys like almost look like they're about to tear up at times. Like they just, it's a young team. They aren't used to losing like this. And I think it's tough, but overall, I think they're mostly managing to stay positive other than the immediate aftermath of losses.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when you look at these guys, you think about Lonzo, you think about Kyle Kuzma, these young guys that have been coming up, they're used to winning. They're used to being the best player on their team and winning a good number of games and having that success, and everybody's patting them on the back. So to suddenly be mired in this slump with a team that really should be better than a 9-game losing streak. I mean, not that they're going to be champions or anything like that, but they should be better than that. It's not easy for them. That's where you need those veterans, guys like Corey Brewer to be there and Brook Lopez to be there and kind of pick things up and say, guys, this is kind of the way the NBA goes sometimes, and you have to be able to play through it. You have to be able to fight through these tough times. And tonight, I think we saw them do that. The concern was that in some previous games, it felt like not only were they not executing, but the effort wasn't there. And I kind of mentioned this already when I was talking about the defense. Overall, it felt like tonight the effort was back, and it's going to be critical for them to sustain that moving forward, that they're able to have that effort each and every night, and that we don't see lapses like we saw against the Charlotte Hornets. I mean, that was a rough loss where we just didn't see effort throughout the entire game.
Yeah, and like I 100% agree with you on the effort. I wanted to jump back really quickly to the guys like having never lost this much. There actually was like a funny moment around that in the locker room the other night when a reporter asked Ingram, "Have you ever lost this much before in your basketball career?" And Ingram just kind of looks at him and he's like, "Well, like last year." It's like, but yeah, you know, other than that, he probably hasn't lost this much. And yeah, that was an awkward moment. It was kind of funny. You could tell he didn't really know how to respond to it.
Oh, I was here last year, so I kind of remember that.
Yeah, that was clearly that was one of those cases where the person's like asking just the same question, I think, like in each little scrum, and it's like they're planning on asking rookies, and I guess like briefly forgot that Ingram is not a rookie. Although you could be excused for thinking that like he wasn't on the team last year because he didn't make that much of an impact. That's kind of like not the nicest way to put that, but he didn't really. And tonight I thought he was incredible, and I think it was again like it was. I tweeted this during the game, but he's made this crazy leap from last year to this year, and you kind of expect that from second overall picks, but it just isn't really getting that much attention either when it should be, I think, how good of a player he's becoming. But, Kuzma is new and shiny. Lonzo is fun to yell about. There's like the LaVar Ball stuff that I'm sure that we're going to get to. Yeah. But Ingram has really, really been incredible. And I think that the strides that he's taken are, I guess they're kind of fitting for a player with like as long of limbs as he has. But he has really just taken a massive step forward this year.
Yeah, I guess when you've got the dulcim limbs, then yeah, you're there. You can take big steps forward, right? This is something I was actually looking at earlier today. I was looking at a few different editorials that I was going to write, and this whole Ingram situation was one of the ones I was looking at, because you're right, it hasn't gotten a ton of attention, but tonight 7 assists. And I believe somebody said this, maybe it was you, that mentioned on Twitter, hey, could this be a result of him playing a little bit of point guard last year?
That was me. I mean, I don't know that I'm the only one that said it, but I did tweet about that. And it's one of those things where everybody was killing Luke by a couple games in last year for continuing to run Ingram out at point guard. And he kept saying, this isn't about this year. And I mean, it would be interesting. I wasn't at the game, I couldn't ask tonight, but he was playmaking like crazy, and he was making these great reads. And I would be curious to know how much of that is that his reading of defenses was accelerated by playing a bit of point guard, even when he was totally overmatched. I think he'd probably admit he was totally overmatched at that position last year, but this year, I think we might be seeing the results of that. I mean, I don't know that that's what he would credit it to, but it is interesting that like now as a secondary playmaker, he is making these really, really solid NBA reads.
No, I would agree that it's the experience. Sometimes even running that point guard role can help you kind of open your mind up to what everybody else on the floor is supposed to be doing. So then when you go and you start playing small forward, you start playing power forward or whatever, you've played that point guard position and you've had that experience of kind of reading everything and not just worrying about your own spot. It's kind of similar to, I can reference this a little bit, to playing goalkeeper in soccer, where you're seeing everything out there on the field and you're responsible for orchestrating it all, and that helps your understanding of every position. Point guard kind of has that feel to it as well, and I think we saw it off the ball. There was a play where Brook Lopez had the ball at the three-point line, maybe just in, he may have been at the elbow, and Ingram made a perfect read of the defense and did a quick V-cut backdoor and got the dunk, and it was just, that was the kind of play that he wasn't making last year. So he is making these strides. He is moving up. If you look at him statistically across the board, he has moved up. He's not putting up like superstar numbers or anything yet, which maybe is why people aren't quite talking about it as much, but he has made real progress, which, as crazy as it sounds, maybe this just means that young players need a little time to develop, and they do incrementally get better. That the guy that comes out in October and November of his rookie year isn't the same guy that you're going to be seeing a year later or 2 years later. As crazy as it sounds, young players do develop.
No, yeah, it's almost like we've been beating this drum with every single young player the Lakers have had the last couple of years, and Lakers fans, God bless them, have been so spoiled by success with this franchise that they just expect it's like an inability to be patient. And I don't mean that to come off as like talking down. Like, it's totally understandable when the team was as good for as long as it is. I think there's just like a lack of understanding of how long a rebuild can take. And what we're seeing with Ingram is the same type of thing. Like, this is the thing to keep in mind for when Lonzo Ball is struggling right now at times. And Lonzo's been better as a rookie than Ingram was as a rookie, but that should only make you, I think, more optimistic for the type of leaps and bounds that he's going to make next year in his second year with an entire offseason to get healthy, address all of his weaknesses, watch film, all of that stuff. Like, these guys, and same thing with Kuzma. He's been really good, not a flawless player yet, but he's going to be a lot better next year, I would imagine. Josh Hart too, Thomas Bryant too. Like, these young guys, they take time, and it's just really, really important to keep that in mind.
Well, hey, let's talk about next year a little bit, because Kobe Bryant was on Jimmy Kimmel the other day, and he had this comment where he was talking about how good the young Lakers are and how he's talked to Randle and he's talked to Kuzma and everything, and how he wants to make sure the Lakers are patient and that they don't do anything rash, they don't do anything drastic, because you don't want to, say 5 years from now, look and see these guys dominating the league and wish that you had had a little bit more patience now. So he's got a point there, but the Lakers still have this plan this summer of going after 2 max free agents in an attempt to kind of turn things around right away. So how does all that fit in? Can the Lakers be patient at the same time as trying to add these max guys like LeBron and Paul George and all that?
I think can they and will they are kind of 2 different questions. I think they definitely could theoretically be patient with these guys, although I mean, there's the question of, like, how do you get LeBron and Paul George to decide to join forces in LA? Like, what makes the Lakers the most appealing destination for that? Is it that they're the only team that has cap space for it? Or are they just one of the teams in LA weather and that's why they want to go? Or is it something out on the floor? And if it's something out on the floor and it's because they want to go to the best basketball situation together, and obviously teaming up with each other would help that, but there's a chance that the Lakers have to package 2 of them. And this isn't like me reporting anything, just to be clear, but there's a chance that the Lakers have to package 2 of these guys to go get another star to draw those guys in or something like that. And that wouldn't be necessarily easy, but they are, Ingram and Lonzo are pretty well regarded, I would imagine, as young prospects around the league. And those are the types of guys that teams give up when they trade for superstars. And so there's a chance that maybe they could go that route, or there's a chance that they say, hey, LeBron, Paul George, team up here. We'll get some veterans around you. Lonzo and Ingram are going to look a lot better next to you guys than they look next to the scrubs that we had this year. And they'll grow and they'll be able to support you as you start to decline. And so I think that's almost the pitch that you have to be making. But for players that have very finite careers and have to live in the now, that might be a difficult sell.
Do you think this stretch, this losing streak, has any impact whatsoever on LeBron James, Paul George, DeMarcus Cousins, any of these guys, of their willingness to come to the Lakers if they're seeing the Lakers finish with, let's say they finish the season with the second worst record in the league? Hopefully it doesn't happen, but do you think that makes an impact?
I think it has to, right? I mean, this specific losing streak, yeah, it makes a difference. But the result of it, where it tanks the Lakers' record and leaves them as one of the worst teams in the league, I think that's definitely something that players notice and the players keep in mind as they're deciding their next free agency destination. How could they not? It's like I said before, they have very finite careers. They want to win now, even if they want to go to LA has other benefits for joining on. But I mean, these guys want to win ultimately. And so I think that the record affects the perception of them. And so even if you're saying hey, we're going to bring in these other guys, a lot of these guys that compiled this record aren't going to be back, and the young guys that did contribute to that are going to be even better next year, that's a tough sell to make, I think, to players sometimes.
Absolutely. And I mean, you make a good point that it's the perception of the team. You want free agents to be looking at this team and thinking, man, they're one piece away. I could be that guy that lifts them over the top. You don't want free agents looking at them and thinking, man, these guys are a long ways away, regardless of what their record is. If it slips too far, yeah, it's going to be hard to make that kind of come to that realization or anything like that. But if they are at least in the discussion, not saying they make the playoffs or anything like that, but if they're at least showing flashes, then maybe you've got something that you can sell those guys on. But if they're just losing and losing and losing like they were during that 9-game stretch, then you've got a whole nother problem. And that's where I think things get really interesting for Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka, because with the D'Angelo Russell trade and a few of these other moves that we've seen them make as far as their free agent decisions last summer went, some of the moves that I'm expecting them to make at the trade deadline and then this coming summer, it's going to be a lot of pressure on them, I think, to deliver one of these max free agents that they keep talking about. I mean, they keep mentioning that they have enough space for 2 max free agents. They don't have that yet, but they could get there. Theoretically, it could happen. But
yeah, it's almost like it's kind of understandable that the players that are basically being told through the media that they are not going to be here would maybe be upset, and that might cause problems as far as trying to win games.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're think about it, if you're Julius Randle, if you're Jordan Clarkson, you know that most likely you have to go if they're going to have enough cap space to get two max guys. I've talked about on this show that there are ways to keep one of the two, but it's extremely difficult. So almost certainly they're going to have to part with both of them in order to get two max guys. And these are guys that have been around longer than basically anybody else longer than anybody else on the team right now, right? Is that right?
Yeah,
yes, they are the two longest serving Lakers right now, Jordan Clarkson and Julius Randle, unless I'm forgetting somebody.
No, they are. And so, they're I think there's an understanding with the two of them. I would imagine that their era is over. And I think that you've seen like both of them take like varying approaches to this. Clarkson seems to really be trying to kind of just have fun. Like he's opened up in the media. He seems to just be trying to, I think, enjoy his time as a Laker. And I think Randall has kind of taken it like offensively. And I don't know that he's necessarily wrong to take it that way. Like he's been arguably the Lakers' best player this season. And that his boss is out there in the media essentially saying that he's going to be gone. And he isn't expressly saying that. He isn't saying we're going to ship Randall out to get two max free agents. But Randall's not stupid. He can do the math. His agent can certainly do the math and tell him about it and like brief him on where he stands with the team. And his agent, I would imagine, has a lot more inside info than you and I do about what the Lakers' plans are moving forward. They didn't even really, it doesn't sound like they really even negotiated much of an extension with him based on all those reports. And so how could you not be a little offended, I think, if you were Julius Randle?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I fully understand why he would be upset. And so it's a tough situation, especially because, like you said, he has been probably their best player this season. He's been a guy that has been pretty dependable night in and night out. He has his flaws, but I've been really impressed with what we've seen from him, and I think if they can figure out a way, I would love to see them bring him back, but I just don't know that they can fix that relationship. If that wound is already there, if Randall feels like he's kind of on his way out the door, I mean, that can be tough to recover from. So that's something that the Lakers are going to have to keep in mind. I mean, let's not forget, it was just a few years ago that the Lakers sent the message to LaVar Odom that he wasn't wanted anymore. Right? They traded him away. Then David Stern came in and did his thing and rescinded that trade. And then next thing you know, LaVar Odom is asking to be traded because he doesn't feel like he can be a part of it anymore because the message was already sent that they were going to move him. So you got to wonder what the relationship is like between Julius Randle and the Lakers and if it can be salvageable because, like you said, he has been so good, you would hate to see him lost for nothing.
Yeah, which is almost why you would think that the team might at least explore dealing him at the deadline and seeing if they can get anything for him, because it's hard to imagine the two sides coming back together. I mean, I guess he is a restricted free agent, so if they whiff in free agency, they could match a deal, but it's a weird situation and a weird dynamic for sure.
Definitely. And stranger things have happened. Who knows? Maybe they all get smoothed over, everything works out just fine, and Randall is a Laker for the rest of his career. It just doesn't seem likely at this stage. So Harrison, before we wrap things up here on the Lakers Nation podcast and jump over to your show, a little bit more craziness happened today, and I don't want to spend a ton of time on it, but the whole LaVar Ball thing. Criticized Luke Walton a bit, hinted at him potentially losing control of the team or losing the locker room.
I don't know that he really hinted at it. He kind of just said it. And then he also said that Luke Walton shouldn't really be the coach, which I thought was kind of the bigger thing that people weren't really even taught. Like he expressly said that Luke Walton should not be the coach of the Lakers.
Yeah, but you know, when I watched, this was a story by Jeff Goodman of ESPN, but you go and you watch the video along with it, and there's some things that didn't make it into the actual story. There's some things that he said where he softens it a little, not a lot, but a little bit. He throws in, hey, that's just my opinion. I might be wrong. I understand that, he's not breathing fire and saying, get Luke out of there, anything like that. So
I'm shocked that context didn't make it into a national story that was designed to kind of draw clicks.
Exactly. Isn't it strange?
Yeah. Well, just weird.
So what do you think about, we'll get into that ESPN part of it in a minute. As far as LaVar making these comments, is this a real problem for the Lakers? Is this something for them to seriously be concerned about, or can they just continue to kind of brush it off?
Yes and no. Again, like I think we talked about the perception of the franchise earlier, and that record-wise, they can't just be like a flaming car wreck on the side of the road, trying to draw free agents. But this is the type of thing that affects perception, and it looks like discord, even if it's not really discord that much. Like you said, there was context in the video that was missed in the story. Luke Walton seemed to be in pretty good spirits about it. He joked tonight that he took Lonzo out early because his dad was talking. I won't use the word Luke. His dad was talking crap, and so I guess waited a couple seconds and then smiled to make sure that reporters knew that he was kidding. But I mean, he seems to be taking it pretty well. It's got a grate on him a little bit that he can't really do anything about this. But I also think that, like, I don't foresee it being a problem. I don't think that LaVar is Lonzo's mouthpiece. I don't think that Lonzo and Luke's relationship is necessarily going to be affected that much by this kind of stuff, at least at first. And so I don't think that it's that big of a functional problem right now. But as far as perception of the Lakers, this is the type of thing where this is why people didn't want LaVar around. And people are going to say, like, he is making the team a joke. And when he goes out and he does things like saying, like, I think LeBron's coming. I think he's gonna come and he's gonna team up with, like, my boy, and like we're gonna get all the Ball brothers in here and all this stuff. Like, all this stuff, it makes the Lakers look like a circus. And that's what they were trying to, like, very clearly trying to get away from with Johnson and Pelinka. And whether or not that's worked is a matter of debate. But I think it's fair to say they were definitely trending in that direction. But then when you have the father of one of the best player, like probably the most important player to your future, coming out and saying this stuff in the media, it doesn't look good. And I can't imagine LeBron wanting to sign on to having to deal with, like, reporters coming up to him at shoot around and being like, hey, LaVar said that, if you would have made that three last night, the team would have won the game, and that you really let Lonzo down. Like, what's your response? Like, you think he wants to deal with that, like, petty BS? I don't think he does.
No, yeah, that's the biggest issue here. I think you're spot on here, because I don't think it matters to Luke. I don't think it matters to Magic, to any of these guys. I think LaVar can say what he wants to say, and it's just LaVar being LaVar, right? I mean, you can just blow it off. It's him being him. It's what has made him a pretty good amount of money. It's what's been driving his brand. It's what's got him a lot of attention. So he's going to say these things. We know it, and you can kind of just brush it off. But if that perception is that, hey, this is something we have to deal with all the time, that may not be something that free agents want to get into. So that's where it can become a concern. Now, Dallas Mavericks coach Rick Carlisle spoke out against ESPN for running this whole story, and said that he's supporting Luke Walton, and that he doesn't think that ESPN should be going and talking to LaVar and shouldn't be running stories like this that are undermining a coach. And there's a lot to unpack there. But in general, do you think is it okay that we're continuing to give LaVar a microphone to speak into? There's a few different angles to look at this from.
So as somebody who's in, like, journalism school right now, and, I would consider myself a journalist. I'm not a traditional journalist. I'm not working for, like, a newspaper. And, like, what we do at Lakers Nation is a little bit different than that. But I feel like my journalistic instincts are, like, okay. And so to me, it's a story that the father of arguably the most important player on your team is coming out and saying that his son's coach has lost the locker room. I think that's a story. I think that that's newsworthy. Now, some of the stuff that LaVar does, maybe not as newsworthy, and maybe there's, like, a journalistic reason to not really cover that it's just kind of like it's that circus stuff where he says, there was actually a really good article on this on NBC Sports tonight, and they brought up the example of him saying that he could beat Michael Jordan one-on-one, and how much that got covered. Like, that's a ridiculous thing that at this point, like, okay, yeah, we probably shouldn't be giving him our platform to say stuff like that unless it's just, like, for entertainment purposes, or you're just having, like, my approach with writing about LaVar Ball has always been that if I feel like what he's saying is something that's meaningful, I'll write about it like it's something that's meaningful. That's not that frequent. A lot of the time what he's saying is bloviating, and it's kind of done winking at the camera with a tongue in cheek, and he's having fun. And I think that as long as you don't treat it like it's a serious thing or a serious narrative, I think it's okay sometimes to cover the weird stuff that he does or the funny stuff. But as far as, like, ESPN not running that article because it's critical of a coach, that's just Rick Carlisle wanting to stick up for a coach. Like, he would have the same problem, I'm sure, with like anonymous sourcing on this coach has lost the locker room. He's like, oh, that's not the type of, because he's a coach. He's going to say that's not the type of thing that could be out there, because that would affect him and he wouldn't want to have to deal with something like that. And so he can be very empathetic to that situation. But a journalist's job is not to cover the stories that are convenient for coaches. It's their job to cover stories. And in this case, like, you could take issue with maybe the way that Jeff Goodman presented this, I guess, like based on that video. I've seen people kind of railing against that today. But the fact that he ran a story and the ESPN ran a story on comments from like this from LaVar Ball, I think that is a legitimate journalism story.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that there is some merit to this one. I think there are some things that get covered about LaVar that don't really have much merit. But then again, you know what? He's kind of a guilty pleasure in some ways. And he's super polarizing. A lot of people don't like him.
He's a soap opera. I called him the Kris Jenner of the NBA tonight. Like that's what it is. That's like the ball.
That's perfect. It's the Kardashians, right? I mean, you look at why are the Kardashians so famous? Why do we pay so much attention to them? And why is everything they do news? Well, it's because people watch it. You know, people pay attention to it, so therefore it is. And same thing with LaVar Ball. People will click on it. People will listen to it. People will react to what he says, either positive or negative. And therefore, people are going to write about him. I mean, when people stop caring about what he says, then they won't talk about him so much. Right?
Yeah, and I think that like there's a journalistic discussion to be had of like, should we be basing our coverage on what people like, and is that good for our society to just like only give people stories that are like, oh, they're going to click on this because it's like kind of titillating. But I think ultimately like there is interest in this, and that is sometimes a reason to cover stuff. And you know, like there's a discussion to be had over what stuff he should be allowed to say. And I thought that NBC Sports article, it's on my Twitter, I forget who wrote it, but like, you know, there's like a legitimate kind of question to be asked there of like, should we take more time? Like if he does something like criticize Luke Walton again, should there be time taken to go to Luke Walton and get like an opposing response from him and stuff like that? But that's kind of the problem with the 24-hour news cycle, is if you don't get this stuff out fast, somebody else is going to beat you to it.
Yeah, exactly. That's just the world that we live in now. And you know what? LaVar has said some positive things too. But you know what? For the most part, it's something that people are interested in. So it's something that people are going to continue to write about. And you know, Lakers fans may like him. Lakers fans may not like him. But I don't think he's going anywhere. I don't think that's going to change. So I think ultimately they're going to have to come up with something, try to figure out some way to manage the whole situation with LaVar. And hopefully they can come to an agreement that works. Because obviously their meeting with him from, what was that, like 5-6 weeks ago, didn't work out so well.
Yeah, no, he toned down his criticisms of Luke Walton for like 4 weeks. And so I don't know. Maybe he thought that only applied when he was in the country. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's right. He's outside of the country, so therefore he's
Lithuania international waters for criticizing coaches, I guess.
There it is. He's got immunity now. All right, well, Harrison, I think that's a good place to wrap things up before we hop over to Locked On Lakers. So we've got a ton more to talk about. Jump over to Locked On Lakers, guys, and I'll be on there with Harrison. We'll be discussing a lot more Lakers stuff, so make sure you hop over to that one, and we'll finish up the show there. As far as this show goes, make sure you guys go and rate, review, and subscribe to the Lakers Nation podcast on iTunes, and of course, go check out LakersNation.com for all your latest Lakers news. Harrison, thanks so much for hopping on this first segment.
No, thank you for having me, and I look forward to the rest of the show.
Yep, should be a fun one, so I will meet you over there. This has been Trevor Lane on the Lakers Nation podcast. See you guys next time.